Years ago, I was doing my dissertation study, and I did my research study on African American women who were psychologically abused by their parents while growing up. And I interviewed several women, and then they told me about several of the ways that they had been abused. Again, excuse me, I've been cleaning my house, and so I had these thoughts, and I said, oh, I better record them. And so I interviewed several Black women, and, these women had gone through a number of things, from being kidnapped as a child to, growing up in a home where they had been physically abused or, sexually abused, those sort of things. And so one of the things that came up in my dissertation study, in which, I had some Black folks on my dissertation panel, and they sort of scoffed at it, and they were like, you need to kind of remove that. But one of the abusive behaviors that I identified was, and that the women complained about, was that when their mothers sort of forced them to watch and raise their siblings. So these women, they were children themselves, and then their mothers continued to have more children. And so their mother the expectation was, you need to be a caregiver to all of your siblings. If you go somewhere, you need to take your siblings with you. If you have a job, then you need to spend money to help take care of your siblings. And it was sort of this forced child labor, child care. And I do think that there is something to be said for forcing your daughters or your children, older siblings, to raise younger siblings without an input. It doesn't matter if you're a single parent or not. And I think that was one of the gripes that my dissertation committee had. Well, they're single parents, so, they might need that and rely on that extra assistance. Well, that may be true, but they're also adults that made decisions to have children that perhaps they could not care for, and it doesn't make their circumstances don't make it less abusive to the ones that have to endure that. And a lot of these women that I interviewed, and I personally interviewed every single one of them, were very, very resentful of having to raise their siblings, and they kind of looked at children with disdain, and they didn't want to have children of their own because they had spent so much of their childhood years having to give up their freedom to raise children that weren't theirs. So if you are a person that finds yourself in this predicament, I think, one, you have to give your children the option of whether or not they want to watch their siblings. Then, reinforce their behavior of them doing something if they choose to do that. So they do need to be, paid for their time and things like that, because I think that gives them the option to know that they are appreciated, they are compensated, and that this is something that they chose to do, not something that they're forced into doing against their will, and that they also have the option to lead their lives. They're not being punished for another adult person's actions, right? Because that also creates stress and strain between daughters and their mothers, and daughters and, their fathers, and so on and so forth. If there was a father figure, a lot of times it happened in a single parent household. So, don't force your children, even if they're older and they're more responsible, don't force them to grow up to be adults or parents too early because of decisions that you make.